Tonight on Free Minds TV, we'll be talking about police in the UK. We'll also be talking about the TSA, and there's good news if you're lazy or cheat on your significant other. You might be able to blame it on a psychological condition. All that plus a whole lot more coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
And welcome to a brand new edition of Free Minds TV. It is episode 146, and as always, it is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
This is the show where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box, bringing you stories from around the United States and around the world. A lot of the time having to do with a bigger and bigger government, but we're going to be talking about some other things as well as including psychology and some new disorders coming out. If you're just a lazy person, or you cheat on your significant other, or you just like to blow up at strangers when you're having a bad day, it might not be your fault. You might just have a psychological disorder. We'll be getting into that. But first, I wanted to concentrate on something that's really, it's been a constant topic here on Free Minds TV since we started doing the show, really. And that's with the TSA. Yes, that beloved government agency. The TSA has been helping to keep Americans safe ever since 9/11. Were they available before then? Were they helping us before 9/11?
No, I'm pretty sure they weren't.
They were helping us since 9/11, really helping keep the skies safe, Nick, and doing a great job, too. And there's some latest of some real heroic work those TSA people are doing, and you've got the latest.
Yeah, this is coming out of Philadelphia, actually. And the TSA, they tend to harass quite a few people and basically search you, deprive you of your civil liberties, things like that. In this case, it's newsworthy because it happened to a 4-year-old boy who also happens to be disabled. So, when they pick on you or me, Toby, it's not as likely to make headlines because, frankly, they do it to everybody. It's really not news anymore because it happens to millions of people every day, and that's really not something that most news agencies are going to take the time to report on. But this case is a little bit different because of who the person affected was. And it happened to the family of Bob Thomas, a 53-year-old police officer in Camden, New Jersey. I guess he's on the emergency crime suppression team with the Camden police. And he was flying to Orlando last March with his wife, Leona, and their son, Ryan. Ryan was taking his first flight to Walt Disney World for his 4th birthday, and the boy is developmentally disabled, delayed, because he was born prematurely, quite a bit prematurely, 16 weeks actually, which is pretty significant. His ankles are malformed and his legs don't have the muscle tone that a normal child would. So he walks with a pair of leg braces, of knee braces, because he's just not capable of walking without them. The muscles in his legs just aren't strong enough to allow him to walk like a normal child would.
Nick, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not a terrorist. Don't you understand?
That's what the TSA is saying in this case.
I mean, there's a good chance he could be plotting to blow up that airplane because he's mad that he has to wear leg braces. So yeah, we should put him through the same street treatment.
I suppose the 4-year-old could be used
leg
as a
braces,
pawn
Nick.
in a
He's
terrorist
angry.
plot.
He's angry.
Well,
and his parents are angry, so they made his leg braces out of bombs and dynamite, right?
Well, here's what actually happened. The Thomases took their son up to the metal detector, and obviously he walked through with the leg braces on, so the metal detector went off, their metal leg braces. The screener told them that the boy had to take off his braces, and the Thomases Bob said, I told him he can't walk without them on his own. The screener, according to Bob Thomas here, said he'll need to take them off. He didn't care. Now, Ryan's mother offered to walk him through the detector after they removed the braces, which are custom made of metal and hardened plastic. The screener declined, said no, the boy had to walk through on his own.
Could he crawl through, Nick? Would that be acceptable?
Which, if
he crawled, would that count?
That might count.
Okay. So they're not being unreasonable. They're just saying he can take off the leg braces, and if he can crawl his way through that metal detector, it's to keep us safe, Nick. This isn't about some 4-year-old with leg braces here. I mean, you're concentrating too much on the individual, I think. I think what you've got to see is the bigger picture, Nick. We've got to make 4-year-olds take off their leg braces and crawl through the metal detectors to keep us safe, to keep you and I in the sky safe, to get that psychological feeling that the TSA is really keeping us safe, really
Well,
watching out for us.
To get that psychological feeling, the fact of the matter is the world's a dangerous place. None of us are safe. I really don't believe that we're really any safer today than we were prior to 9/11 as far as airline security goes, as far as transportation security goes. If terrorists want to mount an attack, there's lots of ways for them to do that. And the TSA hasn't stopped the last couple attempts. The last couple of attempts were thwarted by passengers. In the Christmas Day attempt, the explosive device just malfunctioned, thankfully, so the terrorist really didn't hurt anybody but himself. In the case of Michael Reed, the shoe bomber, he got through security. That failed as well. And the passengers beat the crap out of him when he tried to ignite the explosives, and he was caught. He was unsuccessful. But neither one of those were thwarted by the TSA or by a foreign airport security agency. The terrorists got to the plane. The fact that the attack didn't go through only speaks to the terrorists' incompetence. They're really not that good at what they do. Otherwise, they'd be attacking us a lot more often. It shouldn't be that difficult, but they're just not very competent, in my opinion.
Well, they're dumb enough to believe they're going to get, what, 76 virgins when they blow up an airplane of people? I mean, you're not talking about the brightest people here.
I'm not addressing the morality of the issue. I'm not supporting terrorism here.
Just the intellectual power of
no,
the frontal lobes.
If you talk about it dispassionately, they're just not a very good terrorist organization. The ETA, I think, was a lot more effective. I think the IRA was a lot more effective in terms of launching attacks. Al-Qaeda and those guys are just not that good. Anyway, back to the story here. Obviously, the Thomases were outraged. His son did make it through on his own walking, but Bob Thomas wasn't too pleased with the airport. He left a lot of responses with a lot of angry messages with both the airport director and the TSA. And this kind of thing happens all the time. It's an older article. It's just really surfacing now. But this kind of thing, I'm sure, happens all the time. The only reason it's being reported on is that in this case, it happened to a 4-year-old boy. But that doesn't mean that people's dignity isn't being taken away from them when they're a 32-year-old man. And they're made to take off their shoes or go through this super secret screening. It just, I don't like the whole process.
Yeah, last time I went on an airplane, they touched my balls. Felt a little violated.
Yeah, they patted me down.
Yeah, they touched your balls?
No, the screener was actually pretty reserved about it. But
I
opted for a pat search instead of taking off my sweat.
You wanted that, Dick?
It doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to take off my sweatshirt. So I said, "Oh, pat me down." He said, "You're either gonna have to take that off or I have to pat you down." I said, "Okay, pat me down." He looked a little bit thrown off. I think I made him uncomfortable, which was kind of what I was going for. Yeah. I could have winked at him, I guess.
Yeah, personally, it just
if I really wanted to make him uncomfortable, but.
Go down that road? I don't know. You might be a terrorist. All right. Well, to me, it seems that the TSA is just a bunch of people standing around, wasting people's time. Security theater, if you will. It sure looks like there's security going on. It sure looks like they're keeping us safe. But in actuality, they're not really doing all that much. I mean, we've reported on tons of articles where they fail their own tests all the time. When they test to see if a bomb goes through, bombs make it through well over 50% of the time by their own tests. So, I mean, really, even by their own standards.
Bombs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure there have been cases where they've tested it and maybe they caught 70% of the guns and the bombs.
On average, it's less than 50%.
Yeah, right. I mean, we've seen a lot of those stories. And even if they're only missing 20% of the guns and the bombs going through.
Well, it means Al-Qaeda just needs to send like 5 people.
Send 5 terrorists to 5 different airports, and statistically, they're going to get 1 person through. And if you're on a suicide mission anyway, you view your people as expendable. It doesn't matter if they get caught.
Well, they really are pretty incompetent. Anyways, we could talk about this for a lot longer, but it is time to move on. I did promise a story about psychology and excuses for people who might, well, previous generations would just view you as a kind of a scumbag, but nowadays you might have some kind of an excuse, or at least according to psychologists and the American Psychological Association. This is coming from the Daily Mail, and I'll post the full article up on our forum on our show contents page up at freemindsmedia.org. But it looks like if you are lazy and you lost the remote control or you don't want to get up and change the TV channel, you might no longer be lazy. Don't worry about it. You're just simply suffering from a disorder called sluggish cognitive tempo disorder. It's not your fault. You have sluggish cognitive tempo disorder. You're not lazy. It's not your fault. You have a brain disorder. Maybe you get a temper tantrum when you lose your car keys, or when you're going through the supermarket. Don't worry, you're not explosive, you don't have issues. You just possibly have signs of something called intermittent explosive disorder, where you just explode at little things. Don't worry, it's not you, it's not you. You don't lack self-control. Well, you do, but it's not your fault. It's your brain is miswired. If you find yourself cheating excessively on your significant other, it's not that you're a dirtbag and you're not loyal to your wife, husband, whatever it is. You just suffer from something called hypersexuality. It's not your fault. You can't help this. It's a brain disorder, something such as mental retardation. It's not you. It's not you. Well, that's at least if dozens and dozens of these such disorders do make it into the DSM-5, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, which is released by the American Psychological Association. These are the few disorders I just mentioned are among the dozens and dozens proposed by psychologists to go into the 2013 edition, the DSM-5. Nick, this just seems ridiculous. You can put some kind of a label on all types of behavior. It doesn't change the fact that a lot of people are just dirtbags, and giving them an excuse for it, it just seems wrong to me.
Yeah, well, it's very disempowering too, because what you're telling people is that you're not capable of controlling your own behavior. Frankly, some people are more prone to anger than others. Some people are more prone probably to infidelity than others. That doesn't mean that they have some kind of a psychological condition that's beyond their control.
Right. Well, it might mean that it's harder for them. Like their brain is definitely wired.
That's the kind of person you are.
Your brain is like a computer, and it's wired together with billions and billions of neurons and different brain chemistry, different neurons acting together with neurotransmitters and sending out signals. And yes, that will change who you are. That's what makes us who we are. But I mean, you could just give an excuse for everything. And you're right, it's extremely disempowering. Now, what some of the commentators are saying about this is it might be a push by drug companies, because the more disorders there are, the more things you can medicate for. So now we're going to medicate people who are cheating on their significant others. Now we're going to start medicating people who are too lazy to get their fat ass off the couch and go change the TV channel. Now we get to medicate them. So I mean, this is could be real good for a lot of drug companies.
I think we're already living in a society where there's a lot of overdiagnosis, and I know that a lot of people will say, oh, well, you know, mental illness just isn't recognized as much as it should be. We're not recognizing it enough. And I understand that, yes, there are people who do have psychological disorders that should be recognized in some way, shape, or form. It should be recognized as a medical condition. But honestly, I think there are a lot of people out there, whether they're on Ritalin, primarily kids, or people out there on other drugs for depression. I think there are a lot of people out there who really don't need those drugs. Maybe you are somebody who's prone to be depressed. Do you have clinical depression? I'm not sure that everybody who's on medication for depression does. I don't think that every kid who's on Ritalin, by a long shot, actually needs to be on mind-bending drugs.
Yeah, they might do better with just some exercise and extended recess.
They're kids. They're going to be hyper. That's normal.
They are.
They have to learn how to control it and not just pop pills for the rest of their life whenever there's something that they have trouble with.
Millions of years of evolution has taught children run around and move, and now we're going to be medicating them for it. And here, some kids do need to be medicated. Some adults do need to be medicated. It is going to benefit them. But I think you're right with saying we are completely over-medicating, at least here in America. I don't really know what it's like in other parts of the world. I know the West likes to over-medicate things. A lot of...
Any problem can be solved with a pill.
Right, and there's so much money in the drug companies and pushing through legislation, allowing certain disorders to get federal compensation and such, or on the state level. All sorts of drug lobbyists essentially saying, yes, make this a disorder. So... while the American Psychological Association isn't a government agency, it kind of is prone to the same types of backdoor wheeling and dealing.
It's a governing body in a sense, and so they are prone to submit to pressure from lobbyists. There's, I'm sure, a lot of favors being curried around. You know, there's
who's on the board, and what connections do they have with Pfizer, et cetera.
Right. What kind of gifts are they getting from pharmaceutical companies?
So it smells fishy to me. I think that it's time to stop putting a label on everything and say, look, this is life.
Everybody has some issues. I mean, if you're going to actually diagnose, I mean, in some sense, it is probably correct to say that everybody probably has at least one psychological condition.
Oh,
They have
absolutely.
tendencies.
Absolutely.
You have to learn how to control it. You're a human being.
Mm-hmm.
You're
That's
not
what self-control
perfect.
is.
There is nobody who's 100% normal.
Right.
You would be a very odd person if you lacked any kind of
Any deviation from the
Right.
norm is now a
Right.
psychological disorder.
And
You
what
know,
is the norm? How do you
yeah.
define the norm?
And well, this is the same. The DSM here, the American Psychological Association, used to have homosexuality in there. Your psychological disorder and in there. And so, I mean, I don't know. It seems a little ridiculous to me, a little over the top, but if you have a different opinion, we'd love to hear it. fmtv@freemindsmedia.org is the email address. Do you think people should be labeled and then maybe even medicated and given therapy if they're too lazy?
It's an excuse, is what it is. That's
Or
what
they
gets
cheat
to
on
me.
their others. I know it. It just seems ridiculous.
excuse.
Anyways, we'd love to hear from you either way. Agree, disagree. fmtv@freemindsmedia.org, or you could log on to our website, freemindsmedia.org, and from there, there's just little contact links that you can fill out a little form. No need to sign on to your email. All right, when we come back, we are going to be talking about police in the UK, making sure that the citizens are safe and locking up their windows at night, as well as vegetarianism. Is it good for the environment? We'll be getting into those stories and much more. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV.
This is Will Buchanan. I walked 3,200 miles across the country to move to New Hampshire for liberty, and you're watching Free Minds TV.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV. It is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
All right, when we left, we promised to come back with a story about police officers in the UK and keeping the citizens safe, making sure they're locking up their windows and their doors at night. I think we've reported on similar issues here in the United States, but they didn't quite take it quite as far as some police departments in the UK are currently doing to make sure that their citizens are doing just what they should to stay safe.
It's pretty drastic. And I wanted to point out, we do a lot of articles coming out of the UK, just because, number one, the United Kingdom is such a nanny state that it provides us with all kinds of great material.
Yes.
I mean, the stories coming out of the UK, not that we don't have a lot of ridiculous stories and ridiculous government overreach taking place here in the United States, but especially to an American audience, I think it smacks of being ridiculous a lot more when we talk about a story like the one we're about to report on. But we have a lot of fans all over the world, especially around the English-speaking world. So if you're in Canada, if you're in Australia, if you're in a country that doesn't primarily speak English and you like the show, if you have a ridiculous nanny state story coming out, a story about government overstepping its bounds, send it to us.
Yeah.
fmtv@freemindstv.com.
Freemindsmedia.org, I think, is the way that it goes through best. Anyways, either way.
It's all the
hopefully
same
it'll get there.
domain. It'll probably get there.
The
freemindsmedia.org.
catch-all should get it. Anyways, let's get into the story, Nick.
All right. Stuart Mortimer is an officer from the Cheshire Police, and he demonstrates door hangers that will be given to householders. So homeowners are going to be given these little notices. A shadowy figure lurking in the garden in the early hours. A rattle on a window latch, it must be a burglar. But don't panic too soon and call the police. That could be them outside. Officers have begun testing windows and doors at night as part of a campaign to increase home security. If they find one open, they are under orders to knock on the door and, the article says, drag sleepy residents from their beds and lecture them. But essentially they're going to knock on the door and wake you up and lecture you because they're trespassing on your property without any kind of a warrant.
Now, okay, I know this is coming from the UK, but I have a feeling that if police officers did this in certain parts of the United States, they would be shot. Is that, I guess since they don't have a Second Amendment right over there and they've confiscated most of the guns, this just isn't a worry for the UK? I mean, someone's breaking into your house, rattling out the windows, trying to open a window. There's a good chance that people are going to exercise their Second Amendment right and defend themselves, at least here in the United States. I guess over there, the article is kind of saying, don't call the police just yet. It might be them. Well, and I know that's a joke, but in a sense, wait, should I be checking to make sure it's the police when there's a rattle at my window now instead of calling the police or going out and trying to defend myself? And should I just be waiting and seeing what happens
In the United Kingdom, my understanding is you're really not supposed to defend yourself.
Not allowed.
But the thing of it is, just because guns are illegal in the United Kingdom does not mean that some people aren't going to own them. And when people think that their home is being broken into, they might shoot whoever it is that's rattling on the window or trying to climb through it.
And I don't think this is a good idea. I don't think you should just arbitrarily start shooting at someone who's rattling at your window.
You probably want to make sure that they're actually breaking in and it's
Right.
not like a friend of yours.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm
not advocating
That's
that
a
in
bad
any
idea
way.
because people have
Right.
died that way who
You want to
really
make
should not
sure
have
that
died.
your life is in absolute danger before you're ever firing on someone else. But at the same token, it seems like a very risky business for a police officer to be doing, especially at night. I mean, when we've talked about, I know that we've reported on at least stories of police officers going down the street and trying to open up cars. And when they find a car that's unlocked, they'd lock it and put a note in the car that says you should be locking your doors. We may have reported on ones where they're knocking on doors to see if they're locked, but I know if they did that, it was at least in the daytime. The fact that this is happening in the middle of the night just seems kind of really dumb to me. It seems like it would be a much smarter, a much safer idea if they're going to be doing this, to go about it during the day. Say, first, just knock on the door. And I'm not advocating. I think that people should be responsible for taking care of themselves, not the government.
To lecture you about
I'm just saying,
security.
right. I mean, kind of survival of the fittest in a sense. I mean, lock your doors. It's a good idea.
Be smart about it. It's your property. It's your job to take care of it,
Right.
not the police.
Not the police. But if they, let's just say it is their job, wouldn't it be a smarter idea to not even rattle at the door, not go at night, just come during the day, knock on the door and say, you mind if we check your windows? We know that there's been break-ins. 40% are through a door, open door or window. I think that's what the numbers in the article said.
Yep.
And so it would be a good idea if you check them or allow us to check them at no charge to you. That way they're not risking getting shot or some other horrible disaster
and the
happening.
problems we've had here in the United States with police officers being shot, it's not because they're doing one of these programs where they try to see if a burglar could gain access to a house. It's usually because of a botched raid or search warrant.
No-knock raid.
Right, quite often no-knock raids, where the police, usually on some kind of a drug offense or other vice crime, they get a warrant and it's a no-knock raid because they don't announce that they're there with a warrant. They just kick in the door. Quite often it's a SWAT team or people who are more heavily armed than your typical patrol officer. But it's a no-knock raid, so if they get the wrong house, which they have, and they kick in the door, yeah, there's men with guns there quite often in the middle of the night, and homeowners have shot police officers, and they're serving time now because, well, they shot a man with a gun who kicked in their door.
Yeah, there's, I mean, a couple of people who are on death row right now here in the United States because police got the wrong address, kicked in the wrong door, and
presumably
were shot.
unannounced.
Yeah, they were unannounced, didn't announce themselves as police officers, oftentimes not even marked as police officers, just in black get-up with guns. So, yeah, we definitely do have very big issues here in the United States, but this is just plain stupid on the police department's fault.
Yeah,
it seems just dangerous, reckless endangerment. Anyways, we do need to move on and pick on another part of the UK, but you know, this really could happen anywhere, I guess. But this study, this particular study I'm talking about, is coming out of Britain because that's where the study was conducted, to show that being a vegetarian is not necessarily better for the environment. Yes, the Cranfield University study found that switching from British bred beef and lamb to meat substitutes imported from abroad, such as tofu or corn, would increase the amount of land cultivated, raising the risk of forests being destroyed. Production methods of meat substitutes can be energy intensive, and the final product tends to be highly processed. The report, which was commissioned by the environmental group WWF, found, or World Wildlife, is it Federation?
Yes, it is.
All right. Well, they have found that in this one study, at least, eating meat and stuff that's bred in the UK, as long as you're not importing it from other places, is better for the environment in some cases than eating tofu and other processed meat substitutes. That's shipped in.
Now, but the thing is, most meat substitutes, a lot of them are made from soy. Honestly, I'm not familiar enough with agriculture and what is practical in the United Kingdom to say whether or not you can grow soy. Maybe you can, but I don't know whether it's practical or not.
Well, according to this study, it's not. At least if you're living in the UK. There's not enough land to grow soy, so you're really going to be getting it from other places where they're having to cut down.
I'm just talking about climate, too.
They're cutting down, what they're doing is they're cutting down huge forests to grow this stuff, so they can't do it in the UK, whereas there is already land with the beef. So in this particular region, it's not necessarily better to be a vegetarian. It's actually this report produced by the World Wildlife Federation. And that's why I wanted to bring it to the attention to say that even according to these environmentalists out there, it's not necessarily better.
But they're specifically talking about meat substitutes, which are highly processed. Right. It's my understanding, and it makes sense, that it is more efficient to, say, eat a cereal grain like wheat than to feed that cereal grain to a cow or a pig and raise that animal to maturity and then kill it.
You
Because
typically lose 90% of what you're
It's a factor of 10.
Yes.
So if you get a pound of pork or beef out of it, you fed that animal probably 10 pounds of grain or vegetable matter.
But it does make a difference where you're getting the food from. So environmentalists, if they want to be environmentally friendly to the earth, they shouldn't just be saying, well, I'm eating vegetables, and I'm eating tofu, and I'm eating this. No, what you should be doing is trying to buy locally, because a lot of the what goes into food is transportation of the food across vast distances. I mean, you're eating a banana. How many miles did that banana travel to get to you? It might be better to see what's in season in your area and eat that. And so I think going locally is probably going to be much better for the environment, at least this is what this study is pointing out, than necessarily changing what you eat. Because you're right, it's much more energy intensive to eat meat, but if you're eating, say, vegetables or soy or tofu that's imported halfway around the world, it might be better just to go ahead and eat that meat. Similarly, we've talked about stories of people who say, I'm walking to work instead of driving to work to save the environment. Well, studies show that that's actually more harmful to the environment if you were eating enough calories and to walk yourself, because you're burning more calories than your car is. You are a less efficient person than your vehicle.
Right. The car, basically the impact, the amount of carbon that's released into the environment by eating the food and then walking it off is actually worse than using gasoline in a motor vehicle.
And I am not telling everyone just go out and eat meat willy-nilly. What I am trying to do is get people to think differently, Nick. Not necessarily just eat up what everybody else, what the mainstream media is telling you. Just think for yourself. We challenge you to think outside the box. And maybe it's bad for the environment to be a vegetarian. Maybe it's good for the environment. I don't necessarily know. I think it's a very gray area. But what we want to do on this program is try to get people thinking for themselves rather than just what other people tell them. So don't believe what we think. You can if you want. But we'd encourage you to seek out those facts for yourselves, log on to our website, read the articles for yourselves, poke around, see what you actually think, not what others are telling you. Anyways, that's going to do it for us. We are out of time for this week. Different opinions, we'd love to hear them. fmtv@freemindsmedia.org is the web address. freemindsmedia.org is the other was the email address. freemindsmedia.org is the web address where there's all sorts of ways to help the show, the radio side, the TV archives, the members area, only $3 a month or $30 a year, and of course, ways to contact the show. Until next week, it has been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Have a good one.